Hey there, welcome back to We Be Kids again. I've just been out walking through the woods, and as I was walking and kicking my feet, I was noticing all of the nuts that are on the ground at the moment. And when I was noticing all these nuts, it reminded me of a story that I know. And this story is from a book called Animal Tales from Around the World. They are retold by Angela McCalister. And this story in particular is from Mexico, and it is called The Bear Prince. Now this story begins in a forest with a woodcutter and an axe. And the woodcutter is out in the forest and he's chopping away at the trees when he hears a sound. From in the woods comes a big animal, a bear, and it comes charging out to the forest. It says, "Why are you chopping down my trees?" And the woodsman says, "Oh, I am so sorry, I mean no harm. I only take what I need. And the wood that I take, I sell at the market to earn money so that I can bring up my 5 daughters. The bear says, "You have 5 daughters?" And she says, "Yes, I have 5 daughters." He said, "Well, I am in the mood for cutting you down like you've cut down my trees. But I will let you go if you give me one of your daughter's hands in marriage." Now the woodcutter knew how bad this would be, how terrible. Imagine giving your daughter away to a bear. But if he didn't return, he would be chopped down and then all of his daughters would suffer. So he agreed, if the bear let him free, that he would bring back one of his daughters to marry the bear. So he went back and he told his 5 daughters of what had happened. And his 4 eldest daughters said, "There is no way we will go and marry a bear." But his youngest daughter took pity on him, and she knew what a tough situation he was in. So she volunteered and agreed to marry the bear. And that afternoon, the woodman returned with the priest and his daughter, and they met with the bear in the forest, and there his daughter was married to the bear. And she stayed in the woods with him, and the priest and the woodsman disappeared and left. And the bear led the young woman back to his cave, and there he dragged out a huge wooden crate and he gave it to the lady. He said, "You look in the crate and you put on whichever clothes you want. I will be gone, but when the moon rises and the sun sets, I shall return." And with that, he disappeared into the back of the cave. And the lady opened up the trunk, and inside were beautiful clothes made of silk. And she tried them on, and they were all wonderful and fit perfectly. And she waited until later, and as the sun started to set in the sky, the bear came out of the back of the cave. And he went to the front of the cave and he looked up in the sky. And he said, "Bear so fierce, bear so alarming, change me into a prince, handsome and charming." And the young lady watched as the bear magically transformed into a handsome prince. And he turned round and he said, "Lady, do not fear. You see, over a year ago, a wicked witch cast a spell on me and turned me into a bear, and only in the night can I return to my true self." He said, "But I am telling you this, I have told no other. You must agree to never tell this secret to anybody." And she agreed. And they spent the night around a fire, and he told her stories of when he was a prince, and she told him stories of her upbringing and her childhood. And in that night they fell in love. But when the morning came, the prince went to the edge of the cave and he looked out and he said, "Prince so handsome, prince so charming, turn into a bear, so fierce and alarming." And the magic reversed, and there again he was a bear. And this went on and on for days and weeks and months. And the lady was happy with the night she got to spend with the prince. But a part of her deep down inside was sad, because she missed her sisters and she missed her dad. And she said to the bear, "Could I go back and just visit them occasionally?" And the bear agreed. And the lady put on her beautiful silk clothes and she went back and she visited her sisters. And there, her sisters looked at her wonderful clothes and they were very, very jealous. And they began to make fun of her. They said that those clothes were not fit for a bear, and how she could have gone off and married a bear when really she could have stayed with them. And they made fun of her and they called her names, and she said she felt very, very sad. And in this sadness she wanted to get them back. She wanted to tell them all about what was really happening, how she hadn't married a bear but how she had married a prince. And she told them. And when she told them about the spell, her sisters said, "Why don't you try and stop him from saying the spell? That way he will be a prince forever." They said, "Why don't you tie a scarf around his face so when he wakes in the morning he will not be able to say the words and he will remain a prince?" So the young lady returned. When she got back, she waited into the night. The bear transformed into a prince, and again they sat round the fire. But as the night drew on, the prince fell asleep. And when he fell asleep, the lady took out a scarf. She tied it around his face. And when he woke in the morning to go to the edge of the cave to say the magic words, he couldn't. The scarf was too tight and he couldn't speak. And as the sun rose, he sat there at the edge of the cave sobbing. And the lady took the scarf off. She said, "I thought you would have been happy that I did that." And he said, "Why? Why did you do that?" And she said, "When I visited my sisters, I told them of the magic and they suggested I do this as a way to break the spell." And the prince began to cry. He said, "You promised me that you would never tell my secret, and you have broken my promise. The witch put a spell on me, and the only way to break the spell was for us to be married for a year without you telling my secret. Now that spell cannot be broken. I don't know if I can trust you anymore, but I must leave. I am heading to the castle of faith. Maybe one day you will find me, or maybe you will not." And with that, he was gone. Now the lady was very, very sad about this. The prince that she loved, she was thinking that by breaking the spell she would get to spend the rest of her life with him. But now he was gone. But she knew that she had to find the castle of faith. So she set off on an adventure. And she walked for days and days looking for the castle of faith, but she couldn't find it. Until one day she came to a hill, and on the top of the hill was a big, beautiful beech tree. And she walked up the hill, and there under the beech tree was a wizard. She said to the wizard, "Wizard, I am looking for the castle of faith. Can you tell me where I can find it?" And the wizard said, "I don't know where the castle of faith is, but it sounds like you're on a great adventure, and I want to give you a gift." And he reached into his pocket and he pulled out a beech nut and he handed it to her. He said, take this beech nut, and if you are ever in trouble, eat the beech nut and it will save you. And with that, she carried on walking. And again, she walked for days and days looking for the castle of faith, until she came to another hill. And on the top of this hill was a big oak tree. And she climbed to the top of the hill. And at the base of the oak tree was another wizard. And she said, wizard, can you tell me how I find the castle of faith? And the wizard said, I don't know where the castle of faith is, but I can give you something that might help. And he reached into his pocket and he pulled out an acorn. He said, take this acorn, and if you are ever in trouble, eat it, and it will surely save you. And with that, she wandered off. And she walked for 2 more days, still couldn't find the castle of faith. But she did come across another hill. And on the top of this hill was a hazel tree. And under the hazel tree was a third wizard. She climbed up and she said, wizard, can you tell me how to find the castle of faith? The wizard said, I don't know where the castle of faith is. And he reached into his pocket. He said, but take this hazelnut, and if you're ever in trouble, eat it, for it will surely save you. And with that, she walked off with 3 nuts in her hand. And she walked on until night time, and then she huddled down and she began to feel really, really sad. And as the moon came up, she began to cry, and the moon called out to her. He said, young lady, why are you crying? And she explained. She said, I'm looking for the castle of faith, but I can't find it. Do you know where it is? And the moon said, I don't know where it is, but wait until the morning, because I'm sure the sun will know how to get to the castle of faith. And she waited till the morning, and the moon disappeared and the sun came into the sky, and she called out to the sun. She said, sun, can you tell me where to find the castle of faith? And the sun said, no, I don't know where the castle of faith is, but my friend, the wind surely will. You see, the wind has travelled all over these lands. If anyone knows where the castle of faith is, then surely it is the wind. And the sun called the wind, and the wind come blowing across the land. And there it said to the lady, how can I help? She said, do you know the way to the castle of faith? The wind said, yes, I do. Hold on to me and I will take you there. And with that, she held on to the wind, and he carried her over the lands and up through the mountains until they came to a huge plateau. And there in the middle of the plateau was a castle, the castle of faith. And the wind dropped her down, and the young lady ran into the castle to look for the prince. But as she opened the doors, she was greeted by a huge room with a big wooden table, which was filled with food. And there sat at the table was the prince with the witch. Her heart sank. Maybe he had married the witch after all. And the witch saw the young girl at the doors, and she called her servants to seize her. And her servants ran over and they grabbed hold of the lady and began to wrestle her to the ground. And that's when she remembered the nuts. She reached into her pocket and she pulled out the beech nut and she gobbled it up. And as she chewed it, she transformed from the lady into a rat. She scurried across the floor, but the witch saw this, and the witch used her own magic and changed into a cat and began to chase the rat. The girl knew that the witch would catch her and eat her, so she took the hazelnut and she gobbled that, and she transformed from a rat into a grain of rice. The witch saw this too, and she used her own magic and she changed from the cat into a hen, and the hen began to peck at the rice. The girl reached down again. She took her last nut. She took out the acorn and she gobbled it up. And then she transformed from a grain of rice into a fox. She looked the hen in the eye and she chased the hen out of the castle and off over the hills, never to be seen again. And when the fox returned to the castle of faith, there was the prince. And the prince had remembered what had happened. He reached down into his pocket and he too had a nut from a wizard. He fed the fox the nut, and there the fox transformed back into the young lady. The prince and the lady embraced. They remembered their marriage, they remembered their past, and they remembered their love for one another. And they lived happily ever after in the castle of faith. Hope you enjoyed that story. A nice little autumn story, because it brings the nuts into our attention, and it's a great time to go out looking for nuts. Here in the UK we have a lot of nuts falling to the ground at this time of year, and they are a really, really important source of food for a lot of our animals, especially squirrels. So hope you enjoyed the story. Head out on an adventure, see if you can find some nuts of your own, and also see if you can find the castle of faith. Thanks for stopping by at Weeby Kids. We'll see you again soon. Bye.